Welcome to the Everything Building Envelope podcast. On this show, we discuss topics relating to the exterior building envelope, such as waterproofing, glazing, cladding, roofing, and more. You can subscribe to this podcast on iTunes and Stitcher. For previous episodes, show notes, and bonus video content, check out our website, everythingbuildingenvelope.com. Now, here's your host for the Everything Building Envelope podcast.
Welcome to the Everything Building Envelope podcast. I'm Chris Matthews, Vice President of GCI Consultants, and I'll be your host of the podcast today. I'm very excited today to introduce our guests, Terry Malagoli and Ilsa McIntyre of Infrared Testing, Inc., based in Chicago. They're going to talk to us today about all the exciting activities and current events related to infrared testing in the construction industry and beyond. Welcome, guys.
Great. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. My name is Terry Malagoli. I'm the founder and CEO of the company. I started this company in 1990 and from a fledgling little seed. And today we're a multi-million-dollar corporation, and we are a global company working all over the world. We have in Chicago 14 people in our office, and we have 18 people in the field. They're scattered across the country from California to Florida to New York. We have a team that actually travels outside of the country for us on a constant basis, and we'll do inspections in China, India, Europe, Australia, and pretty much what we cover.
Interesting. Great. All right. So let's talk some about how your work interacts with the building envelope and maybe some areas beyond. So what is the role of infrared in envelope inspections related to building commissioning for verifying new construction and reducing liability?
Well, infrared is really sort of an essential part of the toolbox for a building commissioning. And building commissioning is getting to be a much bigger thing, especially as states and companies and governments are focusing on going green initiatives. More states like California, with California's Cal Green Code, are starting to require building commissioning for all new, larger non-residential projects. It's also essential for things like LEED certification. And what building commissioning is it's a full sort of top to bottom systems check quality assurance process that compares the design with the functionality of the building. It assesses the new construction prior to occupancy, sort of top to bottom, the building envelope, and then inside the functioning of all the systems. And where infrared comes into play in this is both from an electrical standpoint as well as a building structural standpoint, the envelope of the building and the roof.
No, I was just going to add that, and we've been involved with that at GCI, not from the infrared standpoint, but doing some of the envelope commissioning work related to other types of testing and assessment of the system. So I'm familiar with that as well. Exactly.
And, not just new constructions, actually, it's getting to be a thing for recommissioning as these historical buildings are redeveloped for additional uses to sort of convert the building to its new uses. And we go in and check everything with that as well. I don't know if you're familiar with continuous commissioning, which I guess has been developed out of Texas A&M University. Sort of as buildings are, becoming more technological, they developed a system to sort of quantify energy use to continually increase, not just as the building is being built to redevelop, but sort of reevaluate continuously and increase efficiency in building operations. Whereas the initial commissioning and sort of recommissioning focuses on verifying design, continuous commissioning looks at the total overall efficiency, especially with the subsystems. In the new technology, you have the IoT connecting all of your equipment, and thermal imaging really complements this technology to pinpoint problem areas with further precision.
Great. Yeah, very interesting. So how does the infrared envelope testing add value to green initiatives, energy saving programs? I think you were kind of touching on that.
Yes. So again, it's necessary for things such as LEED certification, but the building envelope inspections from an infrared standpoint really came into use in the 70s and 80s. And this was a time where they really saw fuel price increases. And so it became necessary both from mostly a cost standpoint to make sure that you're not leaching energy out of your building, from air leakage, from improper window ceilings, from roof problems. And, they estimate that excessive leakage from problem areas can as much as double energy use. The Energy Systems Lab, again at Texas A&M University, in developing their continuous commissioning systems, estimated that as much as up to really like a fifth of energy consumed in an average commercial building is waste and caused by poorly operating systems. So the infrared standpoint is to try and reduce that energy, both leaching out of the building envelope and then from an electrical standpoint, leaching out of the electrical system.
Right. And I see that from my work in the building envelope, that airflow through the walls is something that wasn't always looked at historically. But now, as you say, everyone's realizing that this seals and airflow are costing people a lot of money.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I
term.
can see it even in my building. I live in sort of a converted, it was a clothing manufacturer, actually. The building was built around 1900. They converted it to lofts in the 90s, and this was before sort of, retrofitted all of these building parts. And now we're sort of having leakage out of the window ceilings and around the outer part of the masonry. And I think that our heating bill for the last month, especially with how cold it's been in Chicago, has been over $200 just for the month. So we're certainly feeling that as well. We need an infrared inspection in my building.
Yeah, there's a real world example of how it affects you right there. So how does the IR imaging kind of relate it more to the work that I'm familiar with? How does it detect failing window seals, faulty or missing insulation, things that might be invisible to the naked eye in an inspection?
Sure. So what we'll do, a lot of times we get called up from clients who think that they have a problem somewhere, but they're not sure, or, sort of like I said with my building, they, just are encountering like massively expensive utility bills. And so they'll call us up and we'll come up and set up the building to do an inspection. What we want to do is we create a negative pressure inside the building by altering the HVAC system. We want to make it either, if it's cold outside, if we're doing the inspection in winter, raise up the heat in the building, make it quite hot, or vice versa in the summer. And that way, what we're looking for is it can be anything from faults in insulation, interior air sealing, faults in the moisture retardation system. Each type of insulation has a characteristic thermal pattern, something like, with an injected foam insulation. What we're looking for is sort of that cracking and shrinking. It can be from poor installation from the get-go, and we see faults in, brand new buildings. And again, that's sort of what we're looking for in the commissioning standpoint. And then certainly in older buildings, as these insulation systems start to wear down, as moisture starts to get into, and the moisture retardation system starts to fail, that's when we really see it.
I had some experience with a similar project. It was a hospital building with a large curtain wall, and they had done some infrared testing that was indicating, it was in Florida, it was a warm climate.
Yes, humid.
Right, and they had concerns about air leakage through the curtain wall and had done infrared testing and identified some, localized problem areas within the curtain wall. And then we were able to use that information and the report from the thermographer to go to those specific areas and identify what the problems were and help them to resolve those. Because luckily in this case, it wasn't a systemic thing that was throughout. It was more isolated locations, but the infrared was great for saying, you've got problems in these 10 areas, and then enabling us as the experts to go up and put our eyes on it and figure out what was going wrong, rather than looking at this 40,000 square feet of curtain wall inch by inch and trying to figure out even if there's a problem, so.
Right.
Yeah.
And yes, the infrared testing, in the end, once we do pinpoint the problems, obviously we'll have to sort of get into the walls for corrective measures. But this way, it can be sort of a good way to estimate costs before you get involved and overly commit to a larger project than needed. But the infrared really, a lot of times we get calls from clients who think they have a problem, or what they think is actually a water leakage problem in their building is really, as you said, an air leakage problem. And the air, as it's coming into the building, especially in more humid climates, hits a certain material that it leads to condensation, and that's where you have the moisture starting to build up rather than moisture coming in directly into the building. And that can be sort of hard to ascertain and guess on, especially if the problem is going through, an indirect pathway, such as through, anything like a plumbing chase in an interior wall, rather than coming in directly through, a failed window seal.
Right. And isn't that usually that the IR is kind of, well, at least in the envelope, in the work that I've done, that the IR is kind of the first step in identifying here are your problem areas. And then usually you need to go in, like in the case that I had mentioned, then you're going to go in with some more in-depth visual analysis or maybe some destructive testing or something to figure out,
Exactly.
okay, here's the problem area. And then what are we going to do to confirm and come up with some solutions? Is that kind of you guys' approach when it comes to the envelope?
Exactly. It's a good first step from the envelope, also with problems with roof systems. Rather than, literally tearing your building apart, removing all the interior, exterior walls, to sort of get a lay of the land of, I know I have a problem in my roof. Again, the moisture may be referred from somewhere else. So, I don't really know how much of the roof is damaged. And with the infrared scan, we can sort of give you an idea of, is it 10% of the roof? Is it 2% of the roof? Is it really just a couple of problem areas? Or is it better to just replace the entire roof?
Right. And you guys had mentioned that you're getting heavily into the drone type inspections when we were talking before the podcast. I would think that the drones are very useful for the roof inspections in a lot of situations.
Oh, yes. For the roof as well as the envelope, it's really sort of revolutionized what we do. And we're just very excited that our drone division is really taking off literally and both literally and physically. So what we do is, especially in the urban areas, we have certified drone pilots now, and they make drones that are outfitted with thermal cameras. And instead of the way we used to do these inspections, especially for the high-rise buildings, you'd have to find a series of buildings nearby and have people strategically located on various roofs. You're sort of like becoming like Spider-Man, having to jump from roof to roof just to get good angles and views of the entire building. And now with the drones, we really get that full 360-degree view, especially just, if there's various overhangs of buildings or multiple roofing types, we can really just get in and see every corner.
Yep, right, great. And we have used probably, certainly not to the level of expertise that you guys have, but with some of that similar stuff with IR in looking at roofs where people believe they have a problem, trying to find where there may be some moisture, and then typically doing some same as I was talking about earlier, confirmation testing where we do some core samples or something to find, okay, is there actually moisture under there? But
yes, exactly.
It's a great tool to either indicate areas where there may be a problem or rule them out either way.
Exactly, before you even have to get to the destructive core sampling.
Exactly. You don't want to punch any more holes into the roof than you have to. So
exactly.
So back to the energy issues. How much can energy loss disrupt building heating and cooling distribution, and how does that impact utility costs?
Great. So like I said, that has sort of been quantified as with Texas A&M and their continuous commissioning, in saying that 20% of energy consumed in a building can be wasted. So, that's just sort of money that's being thrown away. But even going beyond that, you're sort of decreasing the longevity of every system in your building by having this energy leach out. Right from the start, things like building commissioning can find HVAC systems that are sort of hampered by design problems, by installation problems that result in either extensive energy use and just, things like uncomfortable buildings for the inhabitants. And then, as you get to have the problems with air coming into your building of moisture, you're, leading to things such as, the sick building syndrome, that your workers are just becoming physically sick from things like mold problems.
Right, exactly. And that obviously we deal with that a lot from the water side as well.
Exactly, yes. excessive energy consumption can increase your utility costs, but if you tack onto that the indirect costs of, if your water pipes are freezing up, you're having issues with your fire sprinkler systems, again, problems caused by mold, by condensation, the water intrusion, and then you're, of course, opening yourself up to liability from the building inhabitants.
Sure. Yep. The whole sick building thing that you mentioned. So how can the IR testing be used to evaluate current masonry conditions and control costs on repairs?
Sort of like we were talking about with the roof inspection, the envelope, it works the same way. We really go in for the clients both if they think they're having a problem. It's also something we recommend doing every couple of years, and it's starting to get codified. I think Chicago is starting to pass some laws that they require masonry inspections every. Terry, can you help me out? Is it every year, every couple of years?
Yeah, it's every 2 years.
So this is something that we go in, and with the drone, again, it's really simplified and beautified, honestly, the whole process, that we can get these beautiful views of the entire structures of the building, and also a really helpful study of trying to get a baseline condition of how much of an undertaking is this masonry repair project? Do we sort of have to go in and redo the whole thing, or is it just some spot repairs?
Right, and I'm familiar with those requirements. A lot of the big municipal areas in the now, we've got aging buildings, and this is a huge concern, is that these masonry facades are not going to last forever, and you've got to assess them. You don't want to wait till things start falling off the building.
Exactly. So both from an inner standpoint, it's not an option to ignore. You have air and moisture coming into the building, which creates problems inside, as we've already gone over. But outside, as you just said, you can have, serious injuries caused by, falling masonry, falling tile from the outside of a building. And, you're opening yourselves up to a huge amount of liability from that.
Sure. Yeah. Right. Well, lots of areas that the IR is useful. Some I had experience with, and certainly some even in the envelope that I'm really familiar with, some areas that I wouldn't have thought about at first. You guys had also mentioned, I think it's kind of interesting for our audience, some of the work you're doing related to inspections of power grids and wildfire risk, those types of things. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. Yes, this is something that we're really excited about, especially with our drones and energy savings and going green. Something that's really on people's mind a lot from an electric standpoint is with the wildfires out in California, how much of that can be caused by problems in the transmission and distribution lines. And what we can do now, and we have been doing for large companies, is going through and inspecting miles and miles of overhead and transmission lines for faults using our thermal drones before they contribute to things such as wildfires and are obviously very destructive to property and to people.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. Yeah. Another application that obviously is very important.
Exactly.
We've seen it in the news a lot recently, for sure.
Yes, and getting back to sort of the spot isolating hotspots before they lead to bigger problems. Obviously, it's something that before it leads to the bankruptcy of a company or such as PG&E, we can.
Right.
It's something such as repairing certain cutouts before they take down the entire system.
Yes, well worth the investment to get someone like you out there to assess these before it's a much bigger problem. Well, great. I really appreciate you guys joining us today. Why don't you tell our audience how to reach you and talk to you further if they have questions or need your assistance?
Thanks, Chris. It's been a real pleasure. We have a website. We're just at www.infraredtesting.com. Happy to reach out. We have some really cool samples of all of our drone studies, electrical, building envelope, roof inspections. We're happy to speak with anyone and discuss services in further detail.
Great.
Want to give
Thank
our phone
you.
number?
Yes, and our phone, we can be reached also by phone at 312-670-5005.
All right. Thank you. That concludes this podcast. We will be talking to our audience again soon.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks for joining us today. Please subscribe to this podcast on iTunes or Stitcher. For more information on the Everything Building Envelope, previous episodes, show notes, bonus video content, and much more, check out our website, everythingbuildingenvelope.com.